Are you ready for the shocking truth about the crusade that almost ended with empty cauldrons and a torn banner on the walls of the ancient city? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the survival of the Crusaders, who decided to hold Antioch when their strength was running out and hope was dissolving in the dust of the Syrian roads. This is not only a story of assaults and walls, but also of the will, discipline, and calculation of several leaders who argued more fiercely among themselves than with the enemy. Here, alliance and rivalry, religious fervor and cold politics, measured negotiations and sudden assaults were intertwined. Everything influenced the outcome, from winter rains to caravans carrying flour and wood, from local guides to the promises of Constantinople. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the besieged army found a symbol in the ground that turned despair into a march on Jerusalem. What if everything you were taught about war is long outdated, and the real battle begins not on the walls, but long before them, where every day of travel is more precious than blood? I came to this conclusion while studying the route of the Crusade through Asia Minor, where, after victories at Nicaea and Dorylaeum, peasants and knights turned into exhausted wanderers. The first triumphs melted away in the dust of the roads, and confidence gave way to anxiety. The roads stretched between hills and steppes, where the sun scorched the earth to white stone. Where yesterday there had been shade, today there was heat that made horses wheeze and skin crack like old parchment. There was not enough water. Each barrel was guarded, and every sip became a matter of dispute. The Crusader armies, marching in different columns, Normans, Provençals, Flemings, Germans, Italians, resembled a mosaic stream rather than a unified army. Each leader chose his own path, considering it the only correct one. But the roads crossed, the wagons got lost, and the formation fell apart, turning into a chain of people slowly dragging themselves across the scorched land. The enemy was everywhere, though invisible. Turkish troops avoided direct confrontation, but acted with surgical precision. They burned the grass, poisoned the springs, and drove away the herds. Where yesterday there had been a shepherd, only ashes remained in the morning. During the day, the air buzzed with heat and flies. At night, the howling of jackals and the quiet moans of the weakened could be heard. People lost not only their strength, but also their faith. In miracles, in unity, in the very meaning of the campaign. The campaign, conceived as a mission, turned into a series of trials. With each passing day, the army dwindled. Thousands of horses died, weapons rusted from sweat, and armor became unnecessary baggage. Peasants and craftsmen who had joined the army walked barefoot, wrapping their feet in rags. Even the knights, proud and hardened, began to understand that valor could not replace bread. But it was during this grueling march that a new force was born, not from knightly pride, but from endurance. In dusty camps, where the last piece of bread was shared, and in roadside shrines, where people prayed without priests, another army was forming, quiet, patient, bound not by glory but by common need. By the autumn of 1097, this disparate coalition had gathered at the walls of Antioch. It was bursting at the seams, from hunger, envy, fatigue, but it was still holding on. Each leader sought justification for the journey in the upcoming assault. Bohemond sought order and calculation, Raymond of Toulouse sought faith and miracles, and Godfrey and Robert of Normandy sought glory that would drown out their suffering. While they argued, those who simply wanted to live to see the end of the road were dying under their banners. And yet, this painful march gave new meaning to the war. Here, for the first time, they understood that victory is not forged in battle. It is cultivated along the way. Careful logistics, careful accounting, the ability to keep going when the body begs to lie down. These became the secret weapons. Thus, the journey that began with sermons and songs turned into a school of survival. It produced not pilgrims, but people who had learned to endure, wait, and fight without illusions. And now the question for you: what is more important in war? One brilliant battle that chroniclers will write about, or months of grey logistics that feed victory from within? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Next, you will learn how the road of hope turned into a test of faith and character, where every step became a prayer for survival. Are you ready to learn the truth about why the huge city shining on the slopes above Orontes did not fall in a week or a month, even when the light of the torches flickered in the wind and the prayers in the camp were reduced to a few words? Antioch stood like a stone beast, surrounded on all sides but unbroken. Its walls stretched for many kilometers, forming a broken polygon with hundreds of towers, each of which could be a separate fortress. The Crusader troops did not have the strength to block all the paths, trails, bridges, ravines where loopholes were hidden. Yagisian's garrison took advantage of this, like a hunter knows tracks. Sorties followed one after another, cavalry units attacked the supply trains, and from the east, from Aleppo and Damascus, caravans arrived at night with grain, arrows, cloth, and people. Every day that the city held out was a defeat for the besiegers. The elements became allies of the fortress. Winter descended with heavy breath. The rains did not stop for weeks, turning the valley into a swamp where horses sank up to their bellies and carts sank with their cargo. The river overflowed its banks, bridges were washed away, and fires were extinguished by the wind. The camps, stretched out in a ring around the city, sank into the mud. Boots stuck. Cloaks became covered with mold, and even the commander's tents smelled of dampness and smoke. Firewood became as valuable as gold, and bread as valuable as a promise. The cold was no less cruel than the enemy. People slept huddled against their shields, dried their clothes over coals, and shared their last spoonful of wine diluted with hot water. On nights like these, every campfire was a fortress. Disease spread through the ranks faster than rumors, and weakness turned knights into shadows of their former selves. Attempts to storm the walls without machines ended in disaster. Troops without ladders, with ropes and hooks, threw themselves at the walls, but the defenders met them with fire, stones, and boiling oil. No amount of bravery could replace engineering. Then the commanders changed their plan. They decided not to break down the walls, but to tighten the ring. They built wooden towers, moats, and palisades on the hills, blocking the roads. Small groups of knights were sent out on ambushes, intercepting messengers and convoys. Sometimes luck smiled on them, and a caravan fell into their hands. But sometimes everything fell apart, and the enemy, knowing the terrain, disappeared into the fog, leaving behind burned-out carts. Between successes and failures, an endless winter stretched out. Tension hummed in the camp. Soldiers grumbled, and leaders argued. Bohemond dreamed of glory as a commander, Raymond of justice and order. Gottfried sought piety in battle. Robert of Normandy sought spoils and recognition. Their tents stood side by side, but their conversations increasingly turned into arguments about the future, honor, and the right to the city. Behind the outward politeness lay a struggle, quiet but merciless. Meanwhile, the garrison did not surrender. Arrows flew from the towers, drums sounded on the walls, and signal fires flashed at night. The city lived, breathed, and responded to the challenge. For the Crusaders, it was humiliating to stand at the walls where the enemy continued to feast and sing. But it was during these weeks of despair that something began to take shape that would change everything. In the darkness, between alarms and guards, invisible work began. Words instead of swords, whispers instead of siege engines. One man on the tower, tired and forgotten, became the link between two worlds. His decision became the invisible turning point, after which even a stone could not stand. Thus ended the first act of the siege, not with an assault, not with victory, but with a premonition of change. And now the question is, who was the real winner of this stage? The one who held the walls, or the one who understood that cities are taken not with spears, but with human words spoken at the right time. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret. Sometimes cities, equal to entire worlds, fall not from battering rams and ladders, but from a single whisper, a single glance, a single secret gesture that changes everything. At the end of May 1098, the siege of Antioch was coming to an end. Dirt, disease, hunger, and despair had turned the camp into a shadow of an army. People were dying by the fires, priests were praying in whispers, and knights were arguing about who would get the glory if they survived. And then, when faith was running out, a chance appeared unlike any battle. Bohemond, cautious and cold in his calculations, received news from his scouts. There was a man within the city walls, a guard named Firuz. He had once been a craftsman, trading in bronze and fabrics, but fate had led him to serve Yagisyan. He knew the walls like a carpenter knows the grain of wood. He knew when the guards changed, where the torches were left, and most importantly, he knew the value of silence. At first it seemed like a rumor, but verification showed that Firuz was real, and he had a reason to betray. Fatigue, hunger, resentment toward his cruel master. The negotiations went on for weeks, through intermediaries, under cover of night, in the rain, amid the barking of dogs and the rustling of reeds near the Orontes. Words were whispered, phrases memorized, because not a scrap of paper could be left behind. Bohemond weighed the risk. If it was a trap, all would be lost. If it was true, the city would fall without a battering ram. On the agreed night, everything was decided. Darkness fell like a thick veil, and a detachment of several dozen men took off their armor and wrapped their swords in rags so that the metal would not clang. They moved along the ravine, where the water hid their footsteps. Every step was worth their lives. Finally, a shadow flashed at the foot of the tower. Firuz, in a cloak, without armor, stood at the gate. One hand rose, a sign. There was a quiet creak of hinges, and the gate swung open just wide enough for a person to pass through. The knights entered almost silently. First 2, then 5, then dozens. Ropes, short ladders, whispered commands. The first skirmish took place in the darkness. 3 guards fell without a chance to cry out. A torch flared on the wall, a signal that the entrance was open. A stream of people poured inside. The city awoke in terror. Bells rang, drums called to arms, but order was collapsing. The defenders did not understand where the enemy was, inside or outside. The battle in the narrow streets lasted until dawn. Screams, the clang of steel, flames, figures running with torches. Yagisyan tried to organize a defense in the citadel, but the attack was too swift. By dawn, he was found dead, and Antioch, the city of legends, was in the hands of those who could barely stand. But with victory came a new silence. Not joy, but exhaustion. The Crusader troops stood in the middle of the conquered city, where there was no food left, where the wells were empty, and the air was thick with smoke. They had taken the walls, but they had not found salvation. People slept right on the stones, clutching their weapons, as if afraid of waking up in captivity. And just then, while the fires were still smoldering, new dust clouds appeared on the horizon. These were Kerboga's troops from Mosul, Aleppo, and Harran. Fresh, well-fed, organized. They brought vengeance for a city that had fallen, not at the walls, but from within. Thus began the second act of the siege. Victory turned into a trap. Firuz disappeared, his name became a legend, and the warriors who had breached the walls realized that the real assault was yet to come. Like this, if you believe that in the history of warfare, the strongest battering ram is not wood or fire, but human calculation, endurance, and the ability to wait for the moment when the door opens for just one breath, and the whole world changes. Guess what happened next? Those who yesterday were singing hymns and thanking God for the victory found themselves today trapped in a stone cage. The walls that were supposed to protect them became a cage, and the streets, recently filled with torches and glory, turned into narrow paths of fear. The besiegers became the besieged, and it was not the enemy but fatigue, hunger, and doubt that began to gnaw at the army from within. The victory over the city turned out to be only a prologue to a new siege, quieter, but far more terrible. When Kaboga's army, disciplined, fresh, and numerous, approached Antioch, the ground beneath their hooves smoked with dust. The advance guards closed the ring, like a tightening noose. All the roads that yesterday had been traveled by convoys carrying flour, salt, and wine were now cut off. Silence hung over the valley, not an anxious silence, but a deadly one. The caravans had disappeared, the messengers did not return, and the horizons were lost in the haze. It seemed that the very air had become a prisoner along with the people. At first, everyone believed that this was temporary. That help would come from Byzantium, from the Holy Land, from allies, that they could hold out for a week, 2 weeks, a month. But each night brought more fear, and each morning check of supplies turned into an act of despair. Knights counted sacks of grain, divided the remaining wine into drops, and flour into dust. Servants boiled grass, dried leather from belts and horseshoes, just to trick their stomachs with something. Food became a unit of time. What they ate today determined how long they would live tomorrow. Hunger made everyone equal. There were no longer nobles and commoners, only the living and the weak. Lords and pages fought over a piece of bread. Knights and chaplains went together to fetch water, sharing the last barrel. Townspeople who hid stashes of grain became enemies within the walls. They buried their stores under the floors, locked their barns with chains, and at night, people crept to other people's fires to steal at least a spoonful of porridge. And all this happened under the gaze of the citadel, where the remnants of the Turkish garrison still held out. Arrows flew from the towers, signal fires flashed in the darkness, and it seemed that the city itself was taking revenge on those who had come to conquer it. Any fire turned into chaos. Soldiers rushed to extinguish it, not knowing whether it was a barn burning or the last reserves. Every movement of a shadow caused alarm. Every rumor caused panic. People woke up not to the sound of a trumpet, but to the cramps of an empty stomach. Horses fell right in the streets, and their hides were dried and eaten. Shields served as covers for earthen pits where tiny fires were lit. Confusion reigned at headquarters. Some suggested a sortie to strike first before it was too late. Others talked about negotiations, asking for mercy, promising retreat. But everyone was losing strength. Even prayers sounded hollow, as if God was tired of hearing the same thing over and over. Faith, once burning brightly in every camp, now barely smoldered like coal in a wet hearth. Outside, the enemy acted calmly, methodically, confidently. Kaboga understood that a sword was unnecessary when time was on your side. His warriors built redoubts, dug trenches, blocked streams, and took water from the ground itself. Every day, the siege ring grew tighter, and Antioch grew closer to destruction. There was less water than hope, and both were running out at the same time. And yet, in this darkness, amid the filth and hunger, something began to emerge that could not be measured by grain or silver. People began to stick together. Where there had been strife and envy, there was now discipline. Where there had been complaints, there were now prayers. Commanders learned to talk not about glory, but about order. They understood that victory now was not a breakthrough, but endurance. Not a sword, but silence. And then something happened that changed everything. Among the ruins and debris, they found a relic, an object that became not just a symbol, but an anchor for the army's consciousness. It gave people the feeling that God had not abandoned them. The relic became the center of a new faith, a new discipline, and a new breath of life. People began to rise at the signal again, to share food fairly, to stand guard at night without complaint. In the next chapter, you will learn what this relic was, why it became a source of support rather than a weapon, and how psychological resilience proved to be more valuable than an entire barn of grain, because sometimes it is faith, not food, that sustains an army that has nothing left to eat. What you have never seen is how a symbol turns into a schedule and faith into a management tool, not in sermons, but in the mud of camps. Everyone knew it was fair. Gradually, the camp came to life. Where yesterday there had been a sluggish silence, now the forges rang out again. Hammers pounded in the workshops in the courtyards, carpenters hammered on shields, archers dried their bowstrings by the fire. Near the gate, stakes were driven into the ground in straight lines, measured according to the drawings. Even the wind sounded different in these rows, like the breath of order. People who had recently been staggering from hunger no longer felt like a crowd, but like an army. And discipline keeps the fire burning. It saves where prayers fail, because order is a form of hope turned into action. Are you ready for the shocking truth? Sometimes the only way to salvation is not away from the enemy, but straight through their tents, where every mistake smells of death, and every step is a test of faith. After there were now neat tables with times and symbols, like in a monastery chronicle. The weak, the sick, and the wounded were placed in the center, not out of pity, but out of calculation. There, under closed shields, they were protected by the bodies of those who could still fight. Experienced knights, Normans, Provençals, and Lorrainians were placed on the flanks. They had the hardest job: the first blows and defense against encirclement. Each standard bearer was given a reference point. And that was enough. Dust rose like smoke from an invisible fire, but no one stopped. Each step was not a movement of the body, but an effort of the spirit. By noon, the formation had closed into a semicircle. Kaboga's enemy scouts could not believe their eyes. From a city doomed to death, an army had emerged, collected and silent. Not a crowd, not fugitives, a formation marching forward. The first blows were like flashes of lightning. The Emirates' lines faltered, signals were confused, and messengers could not deliver orders in time. Kaboga saw from afar how his ring was breaking, but could not understand where the center of the attack was. Spears bent, banners disappeared in the dust, and cries merged into a roar. The Crusaders marched as if they themselves had forgotten that they were hungry. Their faces were covered with ash and sweat, but their eyes were clear, like those who had already overcome fear. They carried not weapons, but order made flesh. Their ranks tightened like a spring, and each new blow made them stronger. The Kaboga alliance cracked where troops from different lands converged. Syrians, Moselites, and Bedouins argued over who should hold the line and who should retreat. The leaders shouted, but no one listened. The army, which had recently seemed invincible, was suffocating under its own weight. By evening, the field was no longer a field, but a whirlwind. The sun set in smoke, and it seemed as if the earth itself was burning. But the Crusader troops continued to march, without fanfare, without joy, just forward. Their formation, forged in hunger and pain, proved stronger than tents made of silk. In the next chapter, you will learn why Kaboga's alliance fell apart faster than steel under a blow, and how an army that had been deprived of bread yesterday managed to defeat an enemy more than twice its size. What do you think destroys alliances faster? The sword, pride, or time, when the faith of one is stronger than the fear of 1,000? Under pressure from the sortie, the enemy's outer formation faltered, but not immediately. Kerbog's ranks did not collapse in an instant. They diverged like fabric where the seams begin to stretch and burst, leaving light between the threads. At first, these were barely noticeable gaps through which smoke from the fires seeped, then voids between the tents, paths leading to the plains. It was there, into these shifting gaps, that the troops led out of the side gates rushed first. They moved quietly, without shouting, without fanfare, not to finish off the enemy, but to create paths. Their task was not to kill, but to clear the space, to turn the crack into a passage, a corridor through which the main force could pour. It was a moment when the very logic of the battle began to change. The Crusader troops, who just yesterday had been trapped between the walls and the steppe, were now moving outward like water finding an outlet. They did not march in formation. They flowed, bypassed, spread out across the empty spaces, and everyone knew that behind this improvised order lay a carefully constructed plan. In Kerbog's camp, they still believed they were laying siege to the city, but the siege had already turned against them. The key turning point came when some of Kerbog's allies, troops from Damascus and Aleppo, refused to obey orders. They felt that the battle was lost, and without waiting for the signal, they abandoned their positions, carrying their banners toward the plains. The panic was not instantaneous, but it spread like wildfire. The commanders tried to stop the retreat, but their orders did not reach their men. The messengers were lost in the dust, and the signals were invisible in the smoke. The line, which had been dense and solid as a wall just a moment before, began to break into pieces. In these gaps, like cracks in ice, the whole battle began to break apart. The knights understood the moment without words. They struck not for glory or for the cry of victory. Their steps were precise, their movements restrained, their blows short. Each knew whom he was covering and to whom he was passing the position. The corridors they carved out became the living arteries of the army. The infantry moved through them slowly but steadily. No one rushed for loot. Cauldrons, banners, and sacks of grain lay underfoot, but order was paramount. Even the wounded were not abandoned, but dragged aside without interrupting the movement. In the center of the front, they kept pace as if marching to an invisible rhythm. Turkish commanders tried to gather their scattered ranks, but their signals were lost in the roar and dust. The Crusader infantry moved like a wave, coordinated, with natural fluidity. Spears were stuck into the ground at the same angle. Shields were closed, and steps were synchronized. The flanks covered each other like valves, letting new ranks through so that no section was left exposed. By noon, the corridors, which had been unstable and dangerous in the morning, had turned into roads. Wagons, banners, and tired but alive people stretched along them. Dust settled on their faces, but their eyes shone, not with excitement, but with confidence. When the fighters finally looked back, the walls of Antioch no longer seemed like a prison. They saw them for the first time as a rear, as protection, as a sign that everything was not in vain. It was a victory not of strength, but of consistency. A victory of rhythm, where every second, every step, every breath obeyed order. There was no place here for the madness of impulse, only cold endurance and the memory of hungry days when those who knew how to count and wait survived. The battlefield became a machine where each person was a cog. And this machine, creaking but not breaking, broke through the ring that held the city. Thus ended the battle, where it was not inspiration, but iron repetition that decided the outcome. Order became not just a weapon, it became the strategy itself. On that day, people understood that discipline is not a chain, but a force that allows you to move forward when all else is lost. After the siege was lifted, the most difficult question lay on the table, like a map without defined borders. Who did Antioch belong to? The victors sat in the same tent, but spoke different languages of claim. Some reminded them that it was their ladders that first touched the stone, while others referred to the oaths made at the gates of Constantinople, where the emperor had promised recognition and assistance. Still others argued that rights were born not from oaths, but from the blood shed beneath the walls and the grain spent on the siege. The city stood not only as a trophy, but as a crossroads. Its markets, warehouses, and gates led south, where the road to Jerusalem lay. Taking Antioch meant not only conquering it, but also holding it. Garrisons, supplies, and order were needed. This was the trap. Possession required not honor, but responsibility. Negotiations began. Sitting at the tables were not allies, but neighbors united only by their recent battle. Each considered only his own version to be fair. Bohemond referred to military success and personal risk. Raymond of Toulouse spoke of oaths and duty to the emperor. Robert of Flanders sought a compromise, but his words were drowned out by general fatigue and mistrust. As long as the banners remained above the walls, the dispute dragged on. Every day of delay cost food, attention, and strength, and the road to Jerusalem turned into a mirage beyond the horizon. The army, recently united by a common threat, was now falling apart at the seams over questions of ownership. And yet this dispute became a lesson. Here, beneath the towers of Antioch, the knights understood for the first time that the ability to share power and maintain unity was no less important than the ability to keep order in dust and smoke. Victory over the enemy did not mean peace among themselves. Thus ended the first cycle, the struggle not only for walls, but also for meaning. Antioch remained not just a city, but a mirror in which each leader saw what his word was worth when the common enemy disappeared. The hidden truth, which they preferred not to speak aloud, was simple. The promises of allies are worth something as long as they are accompanied by steps, hooves, and caravans. After the fall of Antioch, the camp waited weeks for help from the north. There was talk of troops about to descend from Asia Minor, of new ships sailing along the coast, of rich convoys that would restore confidence and supplies. Plans were made based on these expectations, expanding the garrison, strengthening the walls, preparing for the next stage of the campaign. Everyone relied on the alliance that had once been sealed with an oath before Constantinople. But week after week passed, and the horizon remained empty. When it became clear that no one was coming, and the imperial banners would not appear, faith in the common project began to crack. Hope gave way to irritation, and irritation gave way to mutual recriminations. The old words resounded in the tents again. Oaths, obligations, rights to the city. And everyone interpreted them in their own favor. Bohemond said that Byzantium had abandoned them, which meant that the city should remain with those who had taken it. Raymond insisted on the debt owed to the alliance and the need to maintain at least the appearance of unity. Robert and Godfrey sought a middle ground, but fatigue and mistrust hung in the air, heavier than the smoke from the fires. The army, exhausted by the siege, learned to live without support. Supply trains came rarely. Bread was replaced by dried herbs and meager supplies. But most importantly, the feeling that someone was behind them disappeared. For the first time, the campaign became truly independent. This moment was the climax, the silence after the thunder. The feeling of betrayal destroyed some of the trust, but did not break the goal. On the contrary, it was here that the determination to go to the end was born. Even without allies, without guarantees, and without backup. From this point, the troops turned south. Behind them lay emptiness. Ahead lay the road to Jerusalem. In this simplicity lay a new meaning. To go not for the sake of promises, but for the sake of the journey itself. Information that is worth millions today was then expressed in a few simple, almost prosaic truths. The order of ration distribution, accurate accounting of people, guard schedules, and respect for agreements. After Antioch, It was these very things that saved the campaign from collapse. Where previously everything had been decided by knightly impulse, now organization became the main weapon. The tactics of sorties, strict discipline on the march, and the division of forces into columns ceased to be a temporary measure. They became a system. Each detachment knew its route, assembly time, and share of supplies. Captains were responsible not only for the sword, but also for order in the baggage train. Disputes were postponed until the end of operations, because now they knew that disagreements kill faster than arrows. The alliance with the maritime republics, the Venetians, Genoese, and Pisans, was not a political gesture, but a matter of survival. Their ships brought grain, wine, oil, and wood for siege engines. Without these supplies, the southern plains would have become a deadly trap. Logistics became strategy, and trust in partners became armor stronger than a shield. Gradually, the army realized that walls are not taken by battering rams, but by time, patience, and the precise rhythm of labor. Every day of waiting, every sortie, every cartload of firewood became part of the great arithmetic of survival. The experience of Antioch made the soldiers more attentive to details, to water, to bread rations, to allies living nearby. The ability to listen to the locals, to negotiate, to take into account the climate and roads saved lives more often than the sharpness of swords. The siege, which nearly ended in starvation and discord, became a school of endurance. There, they learned not only to fight, but also to wait, to conserve strength, save breath, and preserve hope as the most scarce resource. Thus, Antioch became a training camp for maturity, a place where a coalition of adventurers became an army capable of going further, to Jerusalem, no longer out of faith in a miracle, but out of a hard-won understanding of how to maintain order in the middle of the desert. What do you think of the theme of Antioch, where victory was born of discipline rather than abundance? Share in the comments what you think is the main lesson of this siege, the secret door, the symbol that was found, or the ability to turn a sortie into order. Write about which great battles of the past you would like to see in future episodes. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new analysis.